Hey there, gang. I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of moving myself down here just for the convenience of what y'all are about to see. For those that don't know, Behavior has recently released the public statistics that they have gathered for every individual player regarding your kill rate, how often you kick pallets, generators, how much blood points you've earned. How many, I should say, am I right? But the point being is that everything that y'all could imagine when it comes to me and how I play clown, right? How well I play, or even just all of those other nitty-gritty details, some of those even including how well do I perform using certain perks, right? All of that is going to be included in this video and discussed. I'm going to go over every single metric with you guys, give y'all my thoughts, especially for those who mostly just tune in and watch my videos. But even though there is no gameplay in this video, I thought it would be something that a lot of y'all would be very curious about because, after all, many of y'all probably don't watch the matches themselves. A lot of y'all catch the highlights. And, again, perhaps some of y'all probably don't even know how many matches that I've played as Clown, right? I've got, even if you're looking at these add-ons, you can tell that I've got a lot of blood points spent. But going to the other event offerings as an example, I've been playing Clown for 5 years. Probably could have played a lot more matches during this time, but still, good a lot of number of matches under my belt. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get on to the statistics. So what y'all are looking at right now is, as of 2 weeks ago, my official Behavior DBD statistics when it comes to everything related to my Clown gameplay. According to what they have to say, we'll go, take things one step at a time. First things first, I've only got 1,268 hours. I'll admit, gang, I thought I had a lot more hours than that. You look at my Steam DBD hours, it says I've got anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 hours. I figured maybe at best only 1,000 or 2,000 of those hours would have been away time compared to, 4 to 5, according to what they say. Because at the end of the day, y'all, I do make content, I make videos, and the DBD client does sit open for that. It's not very often that I close the game, I guess you could say, efficiently, right? I do have a lot of racked up AFK hours, and I guess a lot more than I expected. But also, that being said, I do think this metric here also doesn't factor in any time spent in the main menu, right? So queue times, menu times, booting up the game, time spent even in the offering screen, loading the match itself. I don't think all of that is factored in there, so it's like a really concise and reduced metric. But at the same time, really, what does that mean? It means that you are in game, right? We're talking defending generators, chasing survivors, all that jazz. You were doing that for, in my case, 1,268 hours. That's a long time, gang. Like, really, really think about it. Like, imagine if you're playing DBD and there's no break in between and you are playing DBD for 1,000 hours. That's going to feel like hell. Am I right? No, it's no pun intended considering what DBD is all about, but I digress, So even though it's not as much as I expected, I do think that is still a lot of hours, which will be juxtaposed by the number of matches played when we get to that in just a minute. Next is my pick rate, only 83%. I figured this would be a bit higher, especially toward the 90 percentile. I guess I underestimated how much I've played some variety killers in the past. Notably, I would say, I believe, like Deathslinger, Legion, unironically, I was surprised to see that I have a good number of Legion games. So, in a way, I guess it kind of makes sense, but definitely did think my pick rate for Clown would be a bit higher. It's very, very, very seldom that I'm playing any other killer besides Clown. Hence, going back, right, 7,000 matches. I don't play nearly as much DBD as you would think. All of my matches are just consolidated on one killer. Now, my kill rate. This is where things are going to get a little bit interesting. 61.91%. Now, I know a lot of people probably expect it higher. And admittedly, gang, that is probably the case. When we get to my perks and we start looking at specific perks that I run with regard to both pick rate and kill rate, you're going to notice a pretty decent disparity overall when it comes to my kill rates with the sweatier builds, right, the meta perks, and the more casual perks. Because typically, while I am, you could say, playing to win, within the last few months especially, I've been a lot more casual. I haven't been going very, very far out of my way to win in the most brutal fashion possible. And a good part about that, or as to why that's been the case, is just DBD fatigue. You know, you get burned out of DBD, you have to do so much to stay engaged in a match, everything from tracking your hook counters, which gens have the most progress, this, that, and the other, especially with me commentating. And then there's the whole micro aspect of placing the bottles and how to play chases, all of that stuff, right? So when you like do that for so often and then you just get fatigued with the game and the state of the balancing and the survivor player base and yada, yada, I'm not trying to take this video into that direction, but I hope you'll kind of understand, right? When you start to lose that engagement a bit, unless you're hard committed to it when it comes to your kill rate, and thus your kill rate somewhat suffers by proxy. And, you know, good way of also looking at that too, in relation to that, I've been giving a lot more hatch within the last couple of months before these stats went live, because I just saw it as a kind gesture, right? But for every hatch that you give to the survivors, that is a 25% reduction in your kill rate for that match, because each survivor is worth 25% of the kill rate. You need to kill all 4 survivors to get 100%. So even though you're doing that nice gesture of letting someone go for that BP, as nice as you are, it really, really hurts you. Because again, if you are having these matches that you struggle in and your kill rate's 50% because you only get 2 kills, and then when it comes to you just barely getting these 3 kills and then you decide to give hatch, well, you're kind of creating your top end of being 75% because you're only allowing yourself to get 3 kills because you're giving hatch, and your low end is going to be anywhere from what's behind that, right? 50%, 25%. What happens if you don't get any kills? 0% weight against the top end of 75? Yeah, no wonder my kill rate's 61.91%, right? Because that's kind of just the long and short. I give hatch, sometimes I struggle. I'm not perfect, gang. I make mistakes. And when I'm running builds that don't have any generator perks, I mean, you know, what other recipe are we cooking here, you know? So hopefully that should kind of make sense. Next, let's look at the overall matches played. 7,011 matches. Now, I didn't know how many matches that I would have played. This did kind of surprise me. I can kind of believe that. I do think when you know, going back to how our hours played is only 1,200, I do think that's a little bit interesting. I would have figured that I would have had more hours if I had 7,000 matches played, but, you know, still 7,000, that's crazy. And what I really kind of want to look at more when it comes to that is both the kill rate and my total number of pallets destroyed. Keep in mind, y'all, I do give a lot of hatch. Like I said, I play a lot of matches without generator perks. Being able to maintain that for 7,000 matches, a near 62% kill rate, I find to be very stellar. But even more significant than that is I only managed to kick barely 2 pallets per match for 7,000 matches. Not 70, not 700, 7,000. Because you do the math here, you divide 14,000 pallets by 7,000 matches, that's just barely over 2 pallets kicked per match for such a long and extended period of time. And really think about that. Everything that relates to how many pallets spawn on certain maps, right? Maps like Gideon, where you almost assuredly, if you're going against strong teams that are both efficient on generator progress, but also on where they take your chases, you definitely should be kicking more than 2 pallets. So the number and frequency that you end up on Gideon, that definitely would affect the pallet kick rate. And Gideon is just on the extreme end, right? Plenty of other maps, as long as they have 1 strong jungle gym and Killer Shack, you're already at 2 pallets. Surely there's going to be another pallet somewhere, right, that would need to be kicked more often than not, if just the bare minimum of 1 strong jungle gym and Killer Shack is that 2 pallet average, right? Yet, even then, 7,000 matches, I still have been able to maintain that. Barely 2 pallets per match for 7,000 matches. It's probably my one, like, what do you call it? My one golden star of these statistics, you know, is just that. We've been trying to kind of even more ever since finding this out, play into it, kicking even few or less pallets. But, you know, that's hopefully for some people, that should kind of give them a bit more perspective when it comes to who I am as both a clown player and also a content creator. And the direction I take with my videos and education is that I don't just speak what I don't do. I do the things that I speak. You're not going to see me advocating for strategies that I don't believe are good because they just came out of nowhere, right? Like, no, I'm actually, anything that I push, anything that I describe and break down, I very well do myself, right? So you can not only just follow by word when it comes to me, but also follow by example. Next, let's look at, how about we look at the average blood points earned? Or rather, no, because I think that, we can look at blood points just in general. We can start first with average blood points earned. 77,000. For some people, this might be a little bit out of the ordinary. You might be thinking, how on earth are you consistently earning 77,000 BP over the course of all your matches? Well, again, gang, I don't play DBD probably as much as you would think, and so I'm typically on a lot more frequently during these event periods. Events give you higher blood point multipliers, so if I'm playing events more often than not with BP multipliers, then I'm going to be breaking that pre-multiplier 40k BP average. Next, total blood points earned, 543,597,782. Gang, that's not my BP across every character. That's the BP I've earned on Clown alone. And I'll tell you right now, I spend quite literally just about every single bit of BP I get on Clown into him. So if I've earned 543 million BP, it stands to question I'm either at or very close to Prestige 500 Clown. Prestige 500. And as you may have noticed at the beginning of my video when I was showing my add-ons and my total count, I've got 10,000 Eerie add-ons between both my middle fingers and my pinky fingers. That is literally at or minimum something like 50 million BP in Eerie add-ons alone. 50 million BP. So again, if you were on your way to P100 as Clown, to put this into perspective, that would be as if your first 50 prestige levels are nothing but Eerie add-ons. So like imagine what that looks like. You're just going through every single web, Eerie, 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 Eerie. That's how many Eerie's I have. You would get literally, you would have to go through that for 50 prestige levels. No other add-on or offering in your blood webs in order to reach the number that I have. So really, really cool stuff to see there. Now, everything else too, how about we talk about average hooks? A lot of people might be really curious about that. 7 average hooks per match. Now, gang, this doesn't mean 7 hooks when you factor in survivors hitting second stage. No, what they mean by this is that this refers to actual placing of the survivor on the hook. So let's say, for example, if it says I have 7 hooks, that means that I have hooked on average enough hooks to kill 2 survivors outright with 1 other survivor on their first stage. This isn't I hook someone once, they die on first hook, and then I hook someone else, they die on first hook, and then I get 1 more hook. That's 7 hooks. And one of the reasons I know this for sure, by the way, is a very good friend of mine who I'm trying to get back into playing DBD. He is an artist main, and he showed me his statistics. And what if I told y'all that he has less average hooks than I do? Yes, less as an artist main. But do you know what his kill rate is compared to mine? Again, remember, I only have a kill rate of 61.91%. He has a little bit over 1,000 matches on artist. His kill rate is 90+%. You heard me correctly. 90% on artist with a lower average hook than me with a 61% kill rate. Because what happens in his matches, I've watched him consistently, survivors die on hook stages. They go from hook stage 1 to hook stage 2, if not to hook stage 3, and this means that he's getting, on average, he's not really hooking everybody, and that is how he wins his matches. I've watched him consistently something like 300 matches in a row, 350 win streak that he was on. So, you know, I'm trying to get him back into DBD because I feel like for those reasons, right, there's a whole lot he could really share, but not to kind of digress onto that. My point really being for talking about that is that that is what the average hook is in relation to. It is fresh hooks, not someone hitting the next stage. So 7 hooks per match on Clown, especially when I'm probably not even running in many of my matches any gen slowdown perks. Y'all have seen how I like to run the Gate of Death. Y'all have seen how I like to run variations of other chase builds where I'm using like genetic limits. I'm all ears, right? Lethal Pursuer. I very recently, you know, only very recently within this last week, have started switching back to sweatier builds. And for the last couple of months before this, I have been so much more casual with these non-sweaty chase-oriented builds. So that I think I would go into. Oh no, we can talk about one more thing. We go on to the perk set of statistics. Is my total gens kicked? I've got 4,442 gen kicks. Now I don't know if y'all have noticed, but this is actually less gen kicks than I have matches played. Why is that? Some of y'all might be wondering. How is it that I can actually have less gen kicks in matches played? That is because I go many of my matches without kicking any generators at all. Why would you do that? Some of y'all might be wondering. What's the whole benefit, or at least with Clown, why does Clown not kick generators? If you're running a build or any type of loadout that doesn't have any boost to instant regression, right? So you're purely relying on that 5% that comes from kicking a generator at base, in addition to the passive regression. You're going to find more often than not, there is just not a situation where kicking a generator is beneficial. Either you don't know where a survivor is and they might be stealthing nearby and you can't sniff them out, and kicking that generator before you start looking for someone else is literally just wasted. They're going to undo that 5%. They're going to beat you in overall just net generator efficiency with everyone else working on generators, as you're wasting your time kicking that generator before you start going to pressure them, right? It's just hardly ever worth it to kick generators unless you have generator perks. That is really just what it all boils down to. And that is why I have so few. And plus, another point too, is that it says generator kicks, right? So Clown, typically, who isn't really able to kick generators without giving something up, this is something I've talked about in the past, and also why Blast Mine is also very damaging against Clown, is because typically Clown, more often than not, is giving up the choice to go for a survivor who is working on a generator to choose to kick the generator first in order to get some regression going, because now he loses the ability to commit to that chase, in addition to that application of the instant regression being inefficient. And so that is why a lot of times, more often than not, you'll see Clown builds that incorporate things like Scourge, or even DMS, which blocks the gen, doesn't regress it, right? Or Pain Resonance, because these are perks which regress the generators without requiring Clown to kick them, which means he's not only not wasting time having to kick the generator instead of choosing Chase the Survivor, but is also not having to deal with that downside of possibly getting that stun, in addition to really stalling out that instant regression. Because Blast Mine, again, unironically, very slept on and underrated perk against a lot of these low tier killers that don't have any mobility, since a lot of these killers cannot afford to be wasting their seconds being stunned just before they kick a generator. Sometimes it literally will reach a point where the Blast Mine almost means I just can't even kick the generator now, because I'm literally in such a demand to go where I need to be right now, and that I needed to be there 3 to 4 seconds ago before I hit the Blast Mine to begin with, that it's just like, well, fuck me, right? Language, you know, I just can't kick the gen. So that's why I don't have a lot of gens kicked. Now, next, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at my perks. I bet a lot of y'all are very curious about which perks I use the most, which ones I use the least. There's probably going to be some many usual suspects, and if you've been watching my games, you probably won't be surprised by some of them. But without further ado, now what y'all are looking at is an ordered number of all of my perks that I use on Clown, from 1 all the way down to 14, and at the bottom I also have my gift of Clown perk loadout. For those that have seen me post that video, I believe it's been about a month or two now. It's been some time, gang. Time sure flies. This was a very recent build at the bottom that I discovered. I haven't ran it in a super large number of games, probably about 50 to 70 or so matches, and Jagged Compass should be somewhat representative of that. Refer to the key in order to know what is what when it comes to my pick rate and total number of matches played. So like, for example, we see on the key, it says 10% is 701 matches. This means that if Coup de Grace has a pick rate of 41%, I've got a minimum of 2,800 matches. You then add that extra 1%, probably somewhere close to 2,900 matches, right? Because it's 41%. And that should kind of help you get your ballpark figure when it comes to figuring out how many total matches that I've played. That's kind of why I've got that little down there. But yeah, let's go over each perk and just kind of talk about it, right? Why do I pick this perk above others? Why is it on here? And what are my thoughts on the kill rate and how is it representative of my games? Things like that. First things first, Coup de Grace. 41% pick rate with a 64.61% pick rate, or kill rate, excuse me. Now, Coup is not only one of my favorite perks on Clown, it is, in my opinion, probably his best perk. Not only just for lethality, but also just for catching back up, right? Clown is a 1v1 killer, so when survivors are efficient on their generators, you pretty much can always benefit from Coup in some fashion when it comes to just either needing to tunnel, either needing to finish up what you're doing, and it fits into any build. You can put Coup in a chase build. You can put Coup in a build that's about tunneling or about generator slowdown, right? It's independent and stands on its own. And that's one of the reasons why the pick rate is especially so high. But also compared to some of the other perks that are kind of in a similar category, why the kill rate is just a teeny bit higher, right? 64%, almost in line with some of my generator perks, like Corrupt Intervention, which we'll get to. And next is Zanshin Tactics, a 37% pick rate with a 61% kill rate. Kind of a teeny bit on the lower end compared to some of the other chase perks. And the main reason for that is because not only do I typically run Zanshin Tactics nowadays in builds that don't have any generator perks, but it just doesn't give you any lethality. And it's one thing to have information in order to play off of that momentum, but it does kind of mean, right, that when you are running it in a build that also has a bunch of lethality perks and you don't have any generator slowdown, it's only really doing so much to help you with your kill rate. That is kind of why it's just barely above that 2K average. And another point too, right, since I do run Zanshin Tactics and a lot of chase builds, I do typically let the last survivor go. And that's kind of why, compared to Coup de Grace, Zanshin Tactics is just a few percentage points lower in kill rate. Is that Coup is typically in some of my meta builds nowadays. Zanshin isn't. It hasn't really been as much since I discovered Coup, because when you are competing for opportunity cost in meta builds, you typically can't afford to go beyond one chase perk. And yeah, Zanshin became disincluded as compared to Coup. Zanshin was more relegated to those chase builds where I was playing casually and letting people go, and thus the kill rate slightly suffered for that, in addition to the pick rate. But next, we've got Corrupt Intervention. Now, Corrupt Intervention, being third doesn't really surprise me, since it basically fills a hole that Clown has in addition to other low tier killers, in that he lacks in mobility. And with survivors spawning on their objective and Clown lacking in mobility, it means that he needs some kind of foothold in order to get his pressure going, in the form of starting a chase, getting his 1v1, putting a survivor on the hook, so that way someone else on the survivor team has to deal with that, thus not working on generators, while he's also looking to pressure a different survivor, pulling them off of generators, right? Overall reducing the efficiency that survivors have. That is typically what Corrupt Intervention is about, because when you don't bring Corrupt Intervention and you do have that bad early game, you know, people make mistakes, humans, survivors and killers alike, well, you usually will lose your matches, sadly. That is just the dichotomy of Corrupt Intervention and how influential it is when it comes to your matches. And it's also why my kill rate with Corrupt Intervention is like 65%. And admittedly, right, if we assume even sometimes for just a couple of percentage points that I'm letting survivors go, that just pushes it even more toward that 70% kill rate with Corrupt and all of these other perks. Because that is just the power of just denying survivors the ability to work on generators during your first chase. You have a good first chase, they're still probably going to end up with 30 to 40% progress on multiple generators, especially before they shuffled and moved around the survivor spawns. So that is why Corrupt Intervention is so high, especially compared to the other generator slowdown / regression perks, because of just how much that can change your matches. I would even go as far as to say that individually Corrupt is, again, the best of perks because of just how important that early game is. You can struggle a bit more in your mid game, but as long as, since you didn't lose 2 gens first chase, you probably have a slightly bit more of a cushion. But, you know, without really beating or repeating the same point, that's kind of just the long and short there. Another point, too, if I just, real quick, if I didn't mention it, obviously, yeah, Corrupt Intervention is not in my chase builds. You know, I'm running Corrupt Intervention in very sweaty builds, so I am playing a lot more ruthlessly when I'm running builds that include Corrupt Intervention. Next is Save the Best for Last. Save the Best for Last, a lot of people are probably going to be very surprised by this kill rate. In fact, it's even lower than Zanshin Tactics, especially with it increasing our ability to recover between health states, right? To confirm these kills, things like that. Why is Save the Best for Last so low? Well, Save the Best for Last, I feel like, has a lot going against it. More often than not, you know, people that watch me play with Save the Best for Last, I'm almost always finding my obsession first chase. This hurts my ability to ramp up Save the Best for Last early game when it's most necessary, because again, we were literally just talking about how much on the back foot Clown is just when it comes to his macro pressure against survivors with, you know, spawning on their generators, right? And how necessary it is to have Corrupt so they're not getting all that generator progress very first chase, right? We just got done talking about that. You now look at Save the Best for Last where you don't have any stacks at that very same period into the match and you need to build up your stacks. Yeah, you can't really afford to be running into the obsession for your first chase. You know, especially, right, if you don't have Corrupt Intervention, which is going to be the case if you are using Save the Best for Last in a casual chase build. You're going to be chasing survivors that while they're working on generators and you accidentally, the one you run into is the obsession. So GG no re, right? They're going to pop 2 generators first chase. You're going to have no stacks to save the best for last. You can't really afford to tunnel them without getting 0 value out of that perk. You can't really afford to tunnel anyways because you don't have any generator perks, so you're just going to lose in 1v4 efficiency when it comes to generator repair speeds. And even if you wanted to go for someone else, while you sure could, well, all you're really doing at that point is just accepting and co-signing the fact that you wasted that time chasing the obsession to begin with. Right? So that is why I say the best for last is kind of so low, is because on its own, you need perks to supplement it. And those perks, by virtue of running them to supplement it, right? Perks such as Rapid Brutality to be specific, or even Coup de Grace, well, now you don't have the perks to help you in your necessary macro, right? Dealing with generator repair speeds. That is where perks like Dead Man Switch, Corrupt Intervention, etc. are the most valuable, because Clown can't necessarily afford to be everywhere at once, but these are perks which have what I call global presence. They deny survivors the ability to do their objective globally, irrespective to Clown's lack of mobility or where he is on the map. And yeah, Save the Best for Last just doesn't stack up compared to the other perks. Mainly, again, I would say because of those dependencies. Because sure, you could run Save the Best for Last by itself. You could say, I'm not going to take Rapid Brutality, I'm not going to take Coup, yada yada. I'm going to go Save the Best for Last with Corrupt Intervention even, Pain Res, and Deadlock. How about that, you know? But the problem is, run into Obsession early, you're not building any ramp. You're not really going to want to afford to tunnel them again because of Save the Best for Last. The other perks that I listed would be better for having faster chases, especially in the situation where you're throwing by chasing the obsession. And all it takes in the event that you have a good first chase where you do find the non-obsession, well, the obsession comes in for the unhook. The obsession comes in to pressure your tunneling. The obsession removes your Save the Best for Last stacks. More often than not, you're playing on a map where survivors are going to be able to capitalize off of you in chase with body blocks, etc. by chaining their tiles, right? They're going to have a set of tiles with coordinated body blocking. They're going to give them that distance, and you're just going to lose on the 1v4 because they're going to pop all your generators, especially since the generator perks that you did run, right, are not going to be doing anything because you're not facilitating completed chases. You're not downing anyone to get value out of those perks. So that's really why Save the Best for Last. That's my gripes and my qualms with it. BBQ and Chili. Now, gang, this is how you know, I feel like, if this shit is accurate, that this goes back a long period of time, because I'm telling y'all right now, especially if people that watch me, y'all know I don't run BBQ and Chili. I haven't ran BBQ and Chili since it gave Bloodpoints, in which case I did run it a lot, and that's probably why I guess it is number 5. I must have played a lot more DBD back in the day, and I must have played it so much back when it gave Bloodpoints that to this day, it still has an overall 18% pick rate. But you know what it also has? A 55% kill rate, because this perk is terrible. You literally would run, the reason why I ran BBQ and Chili back then was because of the BP. I wasn't running BBQ and Chili because it was actually a good perk, because what does BBQ and Chili really do for Clown? Again, nothing, because you get 4 seconds of R reading. You maybe know where a survivor's going to be, but by the time you get there, the R reading's gone. By the time you get there, the generator they're working on is probably being completed. By the time you get there, they're probably immersing. And it's just one of those things where it's basically giving you information that you can't really do much with. Right? The best you'll probably get out of BBQ and Chili is to know for sure which objectives are going to pop, so you can know for sure how much you need to camp a tunnel, right? It's just one of those perks that doesn't synergize with Clown compared to other killers that have mobility. You know, someone like Freddy who can teleport to generators, someone like Sadaka who can go through her TVs near generators, or someone like Springtrap who goes through those security doors. Those killers work a lot better with BBQ and Chili compared to Clown, and yeah, that's why the kill rate suffers for that. No Holds Barred. This is Deadlock, for those that don't know. They changed the name because Deadlock is now a general perk. This used to be a really, really great perk on Clown. I haven't been running it as much, and that is why the pick rate is slightly starting to suffer a bit. But this was a perk that, like I was just talking about earlier, right, with Corrupt Intervention and Dead Man Switch, this perk provides global presence. Since Clown lacks in map mobility, perks which stall survivor generator efficiency where Clown can't be and it is necessary, these perks were the best on Clown, and it wasn't until the nerf that I stopped running it as much. It used to be 30 seconds of gen blocking whenever a generator was completed on the next generator with the most progress, which meant that survivors who were being efficient across the board, right, you would be in chase with 1 survivor while survivors 2 and 3, possibly even 4 working on generators. This would basically slow that down. You would end up conceding a generator in order to have another generator that you know isn't getting progress, which meant that you could commit to the chase against the person you're with, and you're not really losing as much, right? Because typically without Deadlock in that that situation. You basically not only are not getting given that little leeway of knowing that the generator, right, you're not the generator is not going to pop in the period of time that you commit to the chase, but in the event that you do want to go pressure that generator, again, you're playing clown. It's not really going to matter as much because lack of mobility means that there's going to be a lot of progress that sticks. You're probably going to be contending with pre-running, right? Survivors especially could be positioned, the generator could be positioned in a way that's semi-near a strong tile. And then you're just kind of, you're sold because of that, you know? So that was why Deadlock was so good. That global presence and the ability of that it gives you this assurance of what you're doing and to commit to that. But reducing it down to 25 seconds, with the current hook timers being 70 seconds, y'all, that's another big thing too. Hook timers are now 70 seconds. Survivors have access to reassurance as a perk. They have shoulder the burden. There's the base kit reassurance with 10 seconds getting added to hook timers. There's base kit BT. There is so much going against you now in macro that the nerf from 30 to 25 seconds, it borderline makes this perk not worth running. You could probably still run it now. I probably still could and it would be okay. But going from 30 to 25 is like losing about a sixth of the value. That hurts, gang. That's like very close to 20% nerf. 20%. So still a really good perk, but not really something I personally like running. I would prefer to take different perks instead. That would probably facilitate overall just a better outcome. One of those perks, I guess you could say still nowadays, although not really too excellent still, I mean, it's got a very high kill rate and pick rate, is Scourge Hook Pain Resonance. Now, what makes this perk still usable, the nerf from, for those that don't know the timeline of this perk went from being able to activate on every Scourge hook to at 15% to only once whenever you would hook a survivor on a Scourge hook for 25%. Now it's down to once when you hook a survivor for 20%. So it's not really all that much better. It's 3% better than it was at base, but you can now only get a fourth of as many hooks out of it. Much reduced value compared to the earlier days, and with how hook timers are now 70 seconds, with how survivors have access to the everything I was talking about with reassurance, base kit BT, still it's definitely not as good as it used to be, but probably the best you can work with, especially if you are playing very sweaty, hence why the kill rate is still about, I would say, 67%. Pain Resonance is probably one of the very few gen perks I would run on Clown nowadays. The others would be some, if we're talking instant regression, would be something like Jolt or Surge. Because, yeah, this, you know, going back to the earlier thing I was talking about with things like Blast Mine, Clown can't really afford to kick generators, and he especially can't afford to kick generators and have his time wasted while he's doing it. Not really too much more to say there, but again, really great perk regardless because of global presence. At number 8, we've got Rancor with a 15.68% pick rate and a 64% kill rate. Now, what's a little bit funny and interesting about Rancor is that I ran this perk with a very specific playstyle. I wasn't running Rancor just to get happenstance kills with it. No, instead, I saw this as a perk for ensuring that you don't actually lose a match. Because that is one thing that Rancor is actually good at. It ensures that you end your match with a 2K. And worst case scenario, if your matches are really that bad, you'll still walk away with 1. But my playstyle with Rancor is I would just try to tunnel out a non-obsession, and if there was barely any generators left, I would look for the obsession, I would slug them, wait till the final generator pops, there's your 2K. Which made it very hard to get less than that with Rancor, and it's probably why the kill rate is around 64%, because what happens if I get an early tunnel out? Well, that means that I can just win the game, right? Because if I can tunnel out a second person, that's 2 kills. Even if they get close and or pop a generator, well, I just hook the third person. There you go, right? That's a minimum 75%. And that's probably why you look at Rancor compared to Save the Best for Last. There's like a, you know, Rancor's kill rate is higher. Rancor doesn't require anything else to have its function. You know, you don't need rapid brutality like with Save the Best for Last for Rancor to feel like it does its job, especially with how we were using it. So yeah, you know, I would say that pretty much is the long and short when it comes to Rancor. I don't really run it as much because, you know, like I said, it is a 2K perk. It's not a perk you run when you're getting more than 2 kills per match. I kind of view it as a consolation. Next, we've got Rapid Brutality. Rapid Brutality is, a lot of people like this perk on Clown. That's kind of why the pick rate's about 11%. You know, it's Probably, I would say, a supplementary perk. It's not too great on its own, but it helps out other chase perks, and it probably, by proxy, makes each perk better. At 64% kill rate, I think, kind of semi-justifies that. Again, you know, given that we run Rapid Brutality in builds that are more chase perk oriented, so not a lot of gen slowdown, the fact that I could get a 64% kill rate with that, I think kind of, you know, shows that it is a good perk. But yeah, you're not really running Rapid Brutality, you know, by itself. I wasn't running Rapid Brutality with like Corrupt Intervention, Pain Res, etc., only in chase builds. So it's kind of interesting to see the difference there, right? In the kill rate between Save the Best for Last and Rapid Brutality. Next is Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher, this perk used to be so much better, and I think that's why the kill rate has started to drop with it. I used to run Sloppy Butcher in a lot of slugging builds. I used to run it in some anti-healing builds, but ever since they gave it a timer. Sorry, we've been talking a lot, and I'm very much still kind of out of sleep, but I digress. Ever since they gave Sloppy Butcher a 90-second timer instead of being unlimited until survivors healed, it made it really easy for survivors to punish Clown's lack of macro, since survivors could have their cake and eat it too. They could simply choose to stick on generators while Clown is preoccupied with their teammates, and then by the time that a generator was finished, the mangled effect would usually be close to expiring, if not expired by then, and thus they could heal themselves, right? So they get the generator done without worrying about the slower healing penalty, and they're able to heal at normal speeds. That's not even taking into account that apparently there's a lot of stronger healing perks out nowadays that really negate and punish the decision of running anti-healing perks, because by comparison, at just an individual one-to-one level, survivor healing perks are stronger than the healing slowdown. So given that Clown, or not even Clown, rather, I should say, Killer only has 4 perks compared to Survivor 16. If you're getting beaten at a 1 to 16, right? Like 1/16 versus your 1 to 4, well, not really good. Not really great to see that with Sloppy, and I think that's kind of why it's starting to drop a bit. And in fact, I would even argue, going on to our next perk, and there's a reason why it's bolded, by the way, that is why, by comparison, Forced Penance is so much stronger. See, I've got, and I will put emphasis on how many matches I've played here. I've got with Forced Penance close to about 600 matches. No exaggeration. Again, use the key, do the math. I've got about 600 matches, close to just an average estimation, using Forced Penance in very sweaty loadouts. I don't run Forced Penance for fun. I run Forced Penance to tunnel. I run Forced Penance to get somebody out of the match, and I run it to make their teammates regret getting in the way of that objective. See, what makes Forced Penance so good, especially against survivors that you will encounter in your matches, if you haven't tried this perk, we're going to be looking at this again in an upcoming video because I have kind of changed my direction, but again, all of that whole other topic. This is a very, very strong perk for trying to win your matches and tunneling. What this does is that survivors who aren't coordinated properly, which is a lot of survivors you'll encounter in your matches, they're going to be taking these body blocks at inopportune times. They're not going to be giving their teammates enough distance to capitalize off of their body blocks in order to prevent you from having an efficient chase. And thus, when you rehook the person that they were protecting and that you were, tunneling yourself, well, that 80 seconds of being broken from Forced Penance really impacts their ability to coordinate and help their teammates at the macro level, because they can't go for an unhook save if they're forced to be injured. They can't heal because they're broken. That is, again, emphasis on that. When you are broken by Forced Penance, there is not any shape or fashion that you can become healthy again. You are locked at the injured status, right? So that means that if you go in for an unhook save, you're going to get slugged. That means that if the killer catches you out of position, he's going to hook you with very fast chase, right? Especially Clown if you don't get some pre-run distance. Forced Penance, I don't want to say shockingly, because, I guess in a way it is shocking. Probably, especially for some of y'all. But Forced Penance, y'all, that kill rate should speak for itself, especially with 600 or so matches. 69% kill rate. That means I'm getting very, very close with Forced Penance of getting 3 kills consistent in all my matches. Survivors are just not ready for it. And when you take a body block at a bad time and thus you're punished with that debuff, right? That's how you win. You snowball out of control. Survivors give you the win or the pressure that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And not even just wouldn't have had because they would have body blocked, but wouldn't have had because you didn't bring Forced Penance. So really look at that yourself. We'll be talking about it later. Very easy perk to use. Literally just tunnel, and when survivors body block, it's going to be doing the work for you. Now coming up next is Pop Goes the Weasel. Now, I really like this perk, or at least I used to like it a whole lot more, especially since it's one of Clown's perks. It used to give a very sizable level of instant regression, and admittedly, it's kind of okay now that they've buffed the base kit instant regression to 5%. But it still has that main flaw that I've talked about before, right? Where you still have to actually kick a generator to get its effect off, right? You're not going to get that burst of instant regression unless you fully commit. And again, you become susceptible to blast mine. Again, you're probably sacrificing the ability to have an efficient chase, right? With the survivor, because they're going to be leaving. They're not just going to wait for you to kick the generator and then start the chase with them, right? Pop Goes the Weasel is not as easy or free as people would think, especially since what happens if you struggle in your chase? Well, you're not getting it to activate, right? Compared to a perk like Eruption, where you cut your losses, you kick a generator, and it's going to at least be put on a generator when you down a survivor, you know, which again, right, you still have to also, just like with Pop, have a successful chase, but I digress. If anything, that drives home the point, you know, these perks, as limited in ways too that their instant regression provides nowadays with the nerfs, you can't just they're not consolation. You can't consolate with them, is what I'm trying to say. And that's why they're worse, because when they do come in when you're ahead, they're not as strong as they used to be, especially by virtue of Clown lacking in the 1v4. So not only does Clown already just lack by virtue of his kit, but now the perks are lacking due to the nerfs. And that is why the kill rate suffers, if I'm to really long and short of what I'm trying to say there. That's why you look at Pop Goes the Weasel compared to Corrupt, there's like a 3 to 4% difference in kill rate. You look at it even compared to something like even Pain Resonance, right? Or No Holds Barred, that's about a 5 to 6% kill rate. Because No Holds Barred, Pain Resonance, you have that global presence. We haven't talked about Dead Man's Switch, but let's go ahead and transition there with its 66% kill rate, right? Slightly less total matches than Pop Goes the Weasel, but Dead Man's Switch, just like No Holds Barred, just like Pain Resonance, global presence. Pop Goes the Weasel, no global presence. So that's what really is the difference there. And it's why you see me run those perks. It's why Dead Man's Switch has the kill rate that it does. Being able to just block a generator for 50 seconds every hook with no timer. You don't have a limited window. That's one thing too, by the way. Contrast Pop Goes the Weasel with Dead Man's Switch. Pop Goes the Weasel, you have a 40-second or 45-second window to get a kick for that instant regression. Dead Man's Switch, you hook a survivor, you can wait 3 minutes. And if a survivor hops off a generator, then that one hook from 3 minutes ago is going to give you that 50 seconds of gen blocking. It's just whenever a survivor next gets off a gen, value, right? Pop Goes the Weasel basically says, all right, here's your timer. Good luck. You need to spend 30 seconds crossing a map. Well, sorry about that. You've got 10 seconds. Oh, you want to chase a survivor and get an injury before you kick the generator because they're slightly out of position relative to the tile, but it's going to take you a few extra seconds? Well, now you don't have enough time to get back to the generator to kick it to get your pop. You kind of see the difference there about why a perk like that could just be so bad and so punishing for Clown. And you know what? Cherry on top, again, putting emphasis, honing back on what I talked about before. What if you're sitting on 2 to 3, etc. seconds left, right? Because you try to go for what I was talking about. You think you have enough time to get that injury and then go kick the generator. Blast mine. You've now lost your window for pop. You may have gotten an injury, but if you can't commit to that chase, if the survivor has healing perks, right, and they punish the stun that you took in order to break distance to where you can't find them, and their teammates are working on generators in the process, and your kick just went from 5% base with pop to just 5% base, y'all really see now how it adds up, right? Especially why pop is worse, especially by comparison to perks like Dead Man's Switch, where a survivor could have a commodious toolbox. And again, no timer on activating Dead Man's Switch, by the way, but a survivor can have a commodious toolbox. They can have 2 survivors with commodious toolboxes. But someone gets off a generator because they see you coming by. Now the gen's blocked for 50 seconds. That is a generator that could pop in 15 seconds that, regardless of what the survivors have and what they can do, is at minimum getting extended by 50 seconds. So that's the explanation there. And it's why it's one of his best. It's why the kill rate represents that. Next, Hex, no one escapes death. This perk used to be so good, man, and I'm so sad. I used to run this perk more, but the problem with Hex, No One Escapes Death, is, believe it or not, this perk is so limited, y'all. It does so little, at least for Clown. Other killers with more mobility who can probably slug because of it, right? Maybe they're able to accomplish more, but here's the problem with Noed on Clown. Clown, in order to win because of Noed, right? If we're talking Noed having an influence on your ability to win a match, end with 3 kills, you have to be entering the in-game phase with one survivor already dead and another survivor on Death Hook. You then need to find that survivor on Death Hook in the in-game, use Noed to kill them, and then you have to start a chase with someone else while they're in that period trying to get the exit gate open, and then you just down them and hook them, and you camp that hook, right? That is literally your limited window, because here's the thing. If survivors aren't on Death Hook like I'm talking about, right? Let's assume you're running Noed, you're having a bad match, you end up in the end game where you've probably got 1 hook at best on any of the survivors. Maybe you have 3 hooks, right? Or hell, maybe you have 4 hooks, but you don't hook the person who's on their Death Hook or their second hook. You don't hook them in the end game. You find one of their other teammates who only has 1 hook. That whole period of time where you are spent camping the hook, because you only have one of 2 choices. You either defend your Noed if they don't go down near the Noed, or you defend your hook. The Noed will get cleansed. They'll coordinate a body block escape with the base kit BT and probably proximity to the exit gate. And Noed essentially does nothing to actually help you win that match. So you're going to walk away without any extra kills from Noed. It used to be with the reduced timers on the hooks, right? When there were 60 seconds each. When No One Escapes Death, there was no aura reading on the totem. It was a whole lot more threatening because every second mattered. Survivors may not open the exit gate. They may 99 the exit gates to get all the time they need there, but the time that their teammates would have on the hook for them to get the job done meant that even though survivors themselves weren't close to dying, they couldn't save their teammates from dying. And nowadays, because you can see the auras, and because hook timers are so long, and because Clown lacks in mobility, if you don't hook near the totem, you're just not getting anything. That's the whole deal. The best you'll get from Noed is if you down a survivor near your hex, you're able to carry them to your hex, you camp your hex and your totem, and then you're getting 1 kill. That's the best you'll get. So let's assume 3 survivors are left in that situation. What does that 1 kill translate into? 2 total kills. Does it make sense now? I know it's only a 61% kill rate because it's not actually helping you get more than 2 kills. It'll definitely help you get the second kill for sure. Probably, again, especially if you're able to hook near the totem. But more often than not, you're either winning your matches if you're going to win and get more than 2 kills with Noed before it would come into play, or it's just not helping you at all. That's just the long and short game. Without repeating the same point, hopefully I've kind of been comprehensive in that. But yeah, that's my first 14 perks. When it comes to my pick rates and my kill rates, my thoughts behind them and why they are where they're at and how they compare to themselves. Lastly, we've got 4 more perks, which are a lot further down on the list. But again, these 4 perks make up my Gift of Clown build. I'll have a link to this as well in the description, especially if I can remember. But these 4 perks are a recent discovery that I've put together that I've found to work very well on Clown. And a big reason for that is because very similar to perks like No Holds Barred, aka Deadlock, Dead Man Switch, Corrupt Intervention, is that when you start slowing down survivor repair speeds with Dying Light and Weeping Wounds / Gift of Pain, you are having, in effect, a form of global presence. Because while you are engaged with the survivor on one side of the map compared to their teammates, the generator might not be blocked, right? And they may still be working on those generators, but you get global presence through the slowdown that comes from Dying Light and Gift of Pain. It basically means, in a nutshell, that survivor efficiency becomes less equatable to Clown's chase efficiency. You're able to hook and down survivors at a faster ratio than survivors are able to complete their generators, and thus it makes it to where Clown as a whole is getting more kills in his matches. And, I'll even say too, by the way, is the cherry on top, is this build accomplishes it all without tunneling. You don't worry about Decisive Strike with this build, and in fact, I'll go as far as to say you go out of your way to avoid it. This build really doesn't want to tunnel, and per that point too, most of the people I see who struggle with this build, they struggle because they try to tunnel. They try to take that square peg gang and they try to shove it in that circle hole, and more often than not, they end up either tunneling out the Obsession by accident, or they tunnel out someone who uses DS to become the Obsession, and then they either give up and cut their losses and lose out on all their efficiency since they didn't apply they weren't applying Gift of Pain, they weren't building up their Dying Light stacks, but if they were to commit to tunnel them, now they lose Dying Light. Dying Light isn't slowing down any of the other survivors. So that is the biggest way of losing with this build, unironically, is tunneling. And without tunneling, look at the kill rates. 71% kill rate on Surge, which I have used in a lot of other builds too, unironically, which is why the pick rate, there's a bit of a discrepancy there between Surge, Dying Light, Weeping Wounds, etc. But every other perk too, look at all of the others. Dying Light, 67.46%, Scourge Hook Weeping Wounds, 72.47%, and Jagged Compass, a flat solid 75%. I know it says I only have 0.56% pick rate with that, but again, y'all, you do the math, and that's something like 30 to 40 matches or so with Jagged Compass alone. The others, right, Weeping Wounds, I've got, in general with Weeping Wounds, a little bit, I would say somewhere, it's like 150 to the 150 to 200 range. A good number of matches though, right? And again, 70+% kill rate, which is a pretty decent contrast when you compare it to my overall kill rate, right? 61.91% kill rate, did y'all forget? But you look at the Gift of Clown, 71, 62, 72. Difference of play style, difference of casualness, I guess you could say. But yeah, that is what I mean when I say this is a strong build. I had at one point, without even trying, a 25% win streak, or 25% win streak, a 25 win streak with this build. I really am tired. And it's just cool though, I guess is what I mean to say. It's cool to just take all of this in and see what behavior has been documenting and all that, and not just for me at least, so I hope it has been for y'all too. But beyond that, I'd say that just about wraps everything up. I hope y'all really appreciated me going over the numbers. Again, y'all, I haven't been getting as much sleep, so if I kind of stumbled or bit, or if I kind of you know what I mean? I'm not talking with for those that don't know, I don't script any of my videos. I kind of just like to keep it more casual conversation off the cuff. So I hope y'all at least really enjoyed all of that. Pretty soon, coming up in my next videos, I'm going to be looking at talking a video about my direction with DBD and how I'm going to approach things, so stay tuned for that. If you're interested in learning how to play Clown better, I have a very detailed Clown guide. There'll be sure to link in the description. And also, I stream live on Twitch during the weekdays. I know y'all, I don't have a schedule, but please bear with me. I'll have a link to my stream in the description. If you're looking to interact with me personally, though, ask me questions, things like that when I do go live. Be sure to follow to, find out when that is. And lastly, if y'all really like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe, not just for yourself so you know when I post new videos, but also because it really helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. It pushes my videos to more people, which means people are able to hear me talk about it, help teach about the game to as many people as I can. So, yeah. Guys, I'm so fucking tired. Other than that, y'all, I really hope y'all enjoy this video, and I'll see y'all next time. Later, gang.